I never thought I'd be the kind of person to let my own brother beg for help while I stood there silent. Everyone thinks I saved him that night. The truth is much darker. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. My brother told me to stop fixing his life. And the wild part? He announced it to everyone at his own birthday party. Let me set the scene. It was Damien's 30th and I'd gone all out. Rented a rooftop bar, decorated the place, invited family. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. I thought I was doing something good for him. But in the middle of it all, after I said I'd always be there for him, Damien stood up, swaying a little with a whiskey glass in hand, and snapped. "You need to stop fixing everything for me," he shouted, his voice sharp enough to cut through the music and chatter. "I'm not helpless. Stop acting like I need you to solve all my problems." The whole room froze. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Mom actually gasped. I was literally holding the condo keys I'd bought for him, the one he'd been living in rent-free for 6 months. But Damien didn't care. He kept going. "This is my birthday and I'm sick of it. Every time it's Kevin did this. Kevin paid for that. We're all sick of it. For once in your life, stop playing Kevin saves the day." He downed the rest of his drink like he just scored some final victory. I slipped the condo keys into my pocket, my heart pounding but my face calm. "You're absolutely right," I said. "From this moment on, I'll stop fixing everything for you." Damien looked surprised at first, then oddly satisfied. He smirked and said, finally, "Thank you." "Yeah, thank you." The next morning there was a knock on my door. Damien again. This time sheepish. He handed me a half-finished resume. "Can you proofread this? That marketing director position closes on Friday." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like me fixing your job situation. And I don't do that anymore, remember?" He blinked, confused. "What? I just need editing help." I shrugged. "You said you don't need me solving your problems. That's literally solving a problem, bro." Damien frowned but didn't argue. 4 days. That's how long his independence lasted. On Saturday morning at 9 a.m. he called me again. "Hey, can you babysit Archie tonight? Just a few hours, you always do." "That," I interrupted, "sounds like another episode of Kevin Saves the Day. And that show's been cancelled, remember?" He groaned, begged, but I stood firm. "Mom might be available. Or ask a neighbor." Turns out he found no one. I knew because the next morning Mom called, furious, demanding to know why I didn't step in. I reminded her, sweetly, that we were just respecting Damien's wishes. But the real chaos started when his rent came due. The leasing office called me since I was listed as a guarantor. "Sir, your brother's 3 months behind. He's at risk of eviction." I leaned back in my chair and smiled bitterly. That must be a mistake. Damien doesn't need me fixing his problems. He made that very clear. They warned me. Eviction was coming. I told them I had no involvement in Damien's obligations. Later I heard he pawned Lucy's wedding ring just to scrape together 1 month's rent. And then 2 months later Lucy herself called me. His wife. The same woman whose IVF treatments I'd secretly paid for. Her voice was weak, laced with painkillers. "They say I need emergency gallbladder surgery. Kevin, the deductible is $8,000. Please, we don't have it." I closed my eyes. "Lucy, I remember what Damien said at his birthday. About me fixing things. I can't. But you paid for IVF. And he said it made him feel helpless. I'm just trying to be a good big brother." The line went silent. Later I learned she maxed out 3 credit cards to cover the hospital bill. All I wanted was for Damien to apologize. To just acknowledge what I'd done for him. But he never did. 3 weeks later I got a call from a Chicago number. A VP of marketing role. A prestigious company. The hiring manager said, "Damien listed you as his primary reference." I almost laughed. "I can't discuss his qualifications. He made it clear he doesn't want me fixing his life." The manager hesitated. "But you're his reference." I repeated, "He doesn't need my help." And I hung up. That missed opportunity broke something in him. He stopped calling. He started drinking more. And then came the 2 a.m. call from county jail. Damien had been arrested for a DUI after his office happy hour. $5,000 cash bail, the officer told me. I smirked bitterly. I'd love to help, but that would be classic Kevin Saves the Day. And my brother said he's sick of it. Damien sat in lockup for 5 days until a public defender arranged a bondsman. His mugshot even ended up on a local blog. At that point I thought I'd proven my point. He'd learned what life without me looked like. We hadn't spoken in weeks. But silence from Damien should have been my warning. It was 7 p.m. when my phone rang. I answered and all I heard was panicked breathing. "Kevin," Damien gasped, "it's Archie." His face is swelling, I don't know how to use the EpiPen. My stomach dropped. "My nephew." "That would be fixing your emergency," I said coldly. "You don't need me. Remember?" But even as I spoke, my other hand had already dialed 911. I gave them Mom's address before Damien even finished the sentence. On the line, Damien was sobbing, fumbling with the bag. Archie's wheezing was faint in the background. "Kevin, I'm sorry," Damien cried. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I'm sorry. For everything, the birthday, being ungrateful, please, he's my son. I need you. I've always needed you." The sirens were already on their way. I'd made sure of that. I finally spoke. "The EpiPen is in the blue pocket of the diaper bag. Orange tip against his thigh. Hold it for 10 seconds. Then sit him upright, keep talking to him until the paramedics arrive." Damien stammered, How did you?" "I called them the second you called me. I'm in the driveway." There was silence. Then his voice cracked. You're here. I exhaled, my throat tight. I'm always here, you idiot. Even when you don't want me to be. I paused, then added almost casually, oh, and Damien? That VP job you wanted? It's mine now. I could hear Archie's cries echoing down the driveway, high-pitched and desperate. It was the kind of sound that claws at your chest because you know a child is terrified and in pain. But Damien? He wasn't even comforting him anymore. He just stood there in the doorway like his entire nervous system had shut down. The ambulance screeched to a halt, doors slamming open so hard they rattled. 2 paramedics sprinted past me with their gear, voices sharp and practiced. One knelt immediately beside Archie, already asking Lucy about allergies while checking vitals. Lucy didn't wait for anyone. She climbed into the back of that ambulance without even glancing at me, her shirt still damp and stained with Archie's vomit from the reaction. Her face was pale, eyes wide, but she didn't waste a single breath on me. The lead paramedic looked at Damien, motioning for him to get inside. But he just froze. His eyes darted between the flashing lights, Lucy cradling Archie and me standing there on the curb. And I swear I could see the exact second it hit him. That hollow, gut-punched look when he realized I'd taken the very job he'd been hyping for months. The one thing he thought would change everything for him. I didn't say a word. I just walked to my car, turned the ignition, and followed the ambulance through the city streets to Northwestern Memorial. My hands clenched the wheel, my brain already doing the math, ambulance fees, ER intake, overnight observation. Without decent insurance, this was going to crush them. The waiting room was overflowing, crying toddlers, a man clutching his stomach, a teenager with a bloody towel pressed to his head, but Archie got rushed straight back. Small mercies. 20 minutes later, Lucy came storming out, fire in her eyes. Damien was hunched in one of those hard plastic chairs, staring at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him whole. Lucy turned on me. You let him panic? For how long, Kevin? Her voice shook. From anger? Fear? Both? I couldn't tell. You stood there while he fumbled, while our son couldn't breathe. And then, she swallowed, her voice cracking, and then you take his job? I stayed seated, calm, too calm maybe. Lucy, your husband stood up in front of everyone at his birthday party and told me he didn't want my help. All I did was respect his boundaries. She actually laughed, a sharp, broken sound. Boundaries? You call this respecting boundaries? You're punishing a child because his father hurt your feelings. Her words landed like a slap, but Damien didn't defend me. He didn't defend himself either. He didn't even look up from his hands. Just sat there, silent, like a man already drowning. An hour later, the doctor finally appeared, saying Archie was stable but would need overnight observation. Lucy went back without saying another word to me. Damien stood, walked right past me toward the exit, shoulders slumped, never lifting his eyes. And I sat there another hour before I finally left. The next morning, Mom started calling at 6. She didn't stop until I finally answered at 9. This has gone too far, Kevin, she said, her voice already sharp with anger. He gets it, okay? He understands now. He knows what you've done for him. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the ceiling. Mom, I'm just doing what Damien asked. He wanted me to stop fixing his life. I'm respecting his boundaries. Don't give me that. Her voice cracked with frustration. You're being cruel and you know it. Your father would be ashamed of how you're treating your brother. That one hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Dragging Dad into it, that was low even for her. I exhaled slowly. Maybe you should stop enabling him too, Mom. Let him figure things out himself like you wanted. The line went dead. She hung up. Monday morning, I walked into the sleek downtown office for my first day as Vice President of Marketing. The place smelled like coffee and printer toner, and everything gleamed with that cold, expensive polish. Juliet Daniels was already waiting in the glass conference room with my onboarding packet. She didn't waste time on small talk. I heard about your brother through the hiring process, she said flatly, sliding the packet across the table. So let me be crystal clear, personal drama cannot bleed into this role. We hired you for results, not family baggage. I straightened in my chair. It won't be an issue. My family situation is completely separate from my work. She gave me this look like she was testing for cracks. Good. Because the last person in this position let their divorce tank their productivity, and we cannot afford that again. She pushed a stack of papers toward me, my first assignment. A campaign on the brink of collapse that needed salvaging. I nodded, already switching gears, burying myself in spreadsheets and strategy decks for the rest of the week. But just as I started to feel like I could breathe in this new life, Lucy's name lit up my phone Thursday night. Her text was short, but it carried weight like a hammer. Damien's arraignment is next week. He can't find a lawyer who'll take payments. 3 firms turned him down. They want $5,000 up front just for the retainer. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. And then, I didn't reply. Damon ended up with a court-appointed attorney. Some exhausted guy drowning in 40 other cases, flipping through Damien's file like it was just another folder in the pile. I swear, the man had maybe 10 minutes to glance at it before walking into court. 2 weeks later, Lucy called me. I could hear it in her voice before she even spoke, raw panic. The hospital filed a mandatory report, she choked out between sobs. Because of Archie's emergency and Damien's arrest. CPS got involved. They're saying the drinking puts Archie at risk. Kevin, do you understand? We could lose our son. My chest twisted. For a second I felt that instinct, the same one that had me fixing everything for years. But then my walls went up. I forced my voice flat. He needs to get sober. That's on him, Lucy. Not me. Silence. Then through tears she snapped, "You're a monster," before hanging up. The very next day I got a call from a CPS intake worker. Her name was Daphne Clean. She sounded clinical, detached, like this was just another box to tick off on her list. "We'll need to schedule a home visit," she explained. "And because you're listed as an emergency contact for Archie, we'll need to verify that you, too, are properly trained in how to administer an EpiPen." That's when it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just Damien's mess anymore. This wasn't just about his drinking or his pride. If he kept spiraling, Archie could actually end up in foster care. My nephew. A kid who had no say in any of this. Friday night. 10 o'clock. There was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Damien stood there on the porch. He looked wrecked. Hollow eyes, stubble patchy across his jaw, shoulders sagging like he was carrying 100 pounds of shame. "I need to apologize," he said, voice breaking. "Really apologize. Not that panicked crap from the other night." He sat down on my porch steps and for 20 straight minutes he spilled everything. How he'd been jealous of me for years. How every success I had felt like salt in his wounds. How he'd resented me for always being ahead while he was stuck scrambling. He admitted the drinking had gotten worse because he couldn't face the failure staring back at him in the mirror. Finally, he lifted his head, eyes red. What would it take to fix this? To fix us? I studied him. Part of me wanted to believe him, to fold him into some neat redemption arc right there. But I couldn't. Not this time. "You start by getting sober," I said quietly. "Then you create a real repayment plan. For everything I've given you. For the $200,000 I've spent trying to keep you afloat." His face went pale. 200, his voice caught. "Jesus, Kevin, I didn't realize." But he didn't argue. He just nodded, defeated, and whispered, "I'll try." Monday morning came with a slap of reality. During our staff meeting, I almost let my pride slip out, bragging about beating out 3 internal candidates for my new role. Juliet shut it down fast. She pulled me aside afterward, her expression sharp as glass. "You need to stop focusing on proving yourself," she said, her tone ice. "I don't care how you got here. I care what you do now. Deliver results. That's it." Her words stung because she was right. My ego wasn't just a family issue anymore, it was bleeding into my career. That afternoon, Lucy texted. Her words were careful, measured. "Collection agencies are calling about my surgery bills. 8,000 plus interest and penalties. Do you know any resources for medical debt?" She wasn't asking me directly for money, not this time. I sent her 3 links to legitimate debt relief websites. But while I typed, I couldn't ignore the thought screaming at me, 1 call. 1 wire transfer. I could wipe this clean in seconds. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table that night and opened Excel. Line by line, I typed it all out. Every dollar I'd poured into Damien since college. The condo down payment, 60 grand. IVF treatments, 38,000 across 3 cycles. Bail, rent, car repairs, hospital bills, groceries, utilities, page after page, number after number, until my hands shook on the keyboard. By the end, the total glared back at me, $212,000. I printed all 23 pages, the weight of the stack heavy in my hands like a verdict. Tuesday morning, I drove to Damien's place. When he opened the door, he looked even worse, eyes bloodshot, stubble grown out, the smell of stale liquor clinging to him. I handed him the stack of papers. He frowned. "What's this?" "Everything," I said flatly. "Every dime I've spent on you since college." He flipped through the pages. His lips moved silently at the numbers and his face went white. 200 grand, he whispered. I didn't waver. "I don't expect it back tomorrow. But I need you to acknowledge it. I need you to own it." His hand shook as he picked up a pen, but he signed the bottom page. Slowly. Carefully. Like his name was the heaviest thing he'd ever written. That was Tuesday. By the following Monday, Mom called me in tears. Her voice cracked as she told me she'd found Damien passed out in his garage, an empty whiskey bottle rolling on the concrete floor beside him. His boss had chewed him out for missing another deadline, and instead of going home, he'd stopped at the liquor store. I listened in silence. Lucy hadn't even called me this time. Mom said Lucy was finished, done reaching out for help. And for the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's emergency contact. That silence, it felt strange. Almost wrong. 3 days later, a text from Damien popped up on my phone. It wasn't a request. No plea for gas money or bills. Just a screenshot. His work insurance had finally approved therapy sessions after months of being denied. His first appointment was scheduled with a therapist named Amir Compton. The message ended with, "Just wanted you to know." That was it. No ask. No expectation. Just information. And somehow, that simple text hit harder than all the begging in the years before. Thursday afternoon, Damien went to his first session. That night, Mom called me again, this time crying for a different reason. Damien had phoned her from the parking lot after therapy, his voice raw and wrecked. He told Amir everything. How he'd been jealous of me since we were kids. How when Dad left, the anger should have gone toward him, but instead I got promoted at work that same week. How every time I helped him, every check I wrote, every solution I handed him, it didn't feel like love, it felt like proof he was smaller than me. Amir helped him see it wasn't really resentment. It was shame. Shame about needing help. Mom said Damien sobbed harder than he ever did when Dad left. Meanwhile, reality didn't stop. Vincent Coffey, the attorney overseeing Damien's DUI case, called me. He broke down what Damien was facing. An ignition interlock device for 18 months at $70 a month. Mandatory alcohol education classes, 12 sessions, $50 each. State Route 22 insurance, which would triple his car insurance rates. Probation fees $40 every month. Vincent said Damien kept asking the same question during their meeting. Do you have payment plans? He was scribbling numbers on a napkin, desperately trying to make the math work. And for once, he wasn't asking me. The following Tuesday, CPS showed up for their home visit. The intake worker, Daphne Clean, walked through the house with her clipboard like she'd seen it all before. Her eyes caught everything. Expired EpiPens in the kitchen drawer, 6 months past date. A liquor cabinet with no lock. No emergency allergy plan posted anywhere. Cleaning supplies under the sink with no safety latch. She wrote it all down while Lucy scrambled to explain. Damien got defensive, muttering about government overreach, but Daphne stayed calm and professional. She handed them a paper. You have 2 weeks to fix these issues, she said evenly, or we'll have to consider placement options for Archie. Lucy's face went pale. That Thursday, I showed up at Archie's allergist appointment. I stayed in the back corner, quiet, while the doctor walked through the allergy action plan. Every caregiver must know how to use an EpiPen, she stressed. When she asked who else watched Archie, I raised my hand. Damien's jaw clenched tight, but he said nothing. Lucy turned, mouth thank you with watery eyes. Damien stared at the floor. The doctor scheduled a caregiver training class for the following week. Friday morning, another blow landed. Their landlord taped an eviction notice to the front door. 3 months behind on rent, plus late fees. 30 days to come up with $8,000 or get out. That night, Damien knocked on my door again. His voice was hoarse, low. Would you co-sign a lease for us somewhere cheaper? I shook my head. He nodded. Quiet this time. And left without arguing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up researching. 12 apartment complexes that worked with bad credit. I built a spreadsheet, monthly costs, deposits, distance to Archie's school. Added links to food banks, utility assistance programs, legal aid clinics. At 2 a.m., I emailed it to him without a single word in the body. 10 minutes later, his reply came back. Received, thanks. Just 2 words. But I felt everything behind them. Sunday dinner at Mom's house was quiet. Too quiet. Until dessert. Mom's fork clattered against her plate as she broke down crying. I miss how things used to be. I hate seeing my boys like this. The words that came out of me weren't planned. They just slipped free. I liked being needed. The room went still. Being the family savior made me feel important, I added, the truth heavy and ugly in my mouth. Mom stopped crying. Damien kept his eyes on his plate. Lucy shifted Archie in her arms, holding him tighter. I used money to feel necessary, I admitted. Every check I wrote made me feel valuable. The air in that dining room got suffocating. The good china sat cooling, untouched. Finally, Damien lifted his head. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I knew that. I hated you for it, but I took the money anyway. Mom reached across the table, her hands trembling as she grabbed both of ours. My boys, she whispered before breaking down again. Archie started fussing and Lucy slipped outside with him. That left the 3 of us just sitting there in silence while the pie went cold. 3 days after that dinner, I pulled into Mom's driveway and spotted Damien's beat-up Honda. The backseat was crammed with insulated food delivery bags, the kind that reek of fries and lo mein no matter how many air fresheners you hang. Damien was leaning against the hood, phone in hand, refreshing his app between runs. Inside, Lucy was staging her Coach purse on the kitchen table like it was a museum piece, angled lighting, careful shots from every side. She'd started at $800. By Wednesday, the listing was down to $550. Friday and Saturday nights, Damien worked the drunk rush. Left at 5, stumbled home after midnight, his car heavy with the smell of strangers' takeout orders. Lucy sold her wedding jewelry next. Everything but the ring. She posted in 3 different buy and sell groups, meeting strangers in parking lots while Damien stayed home with Archie. And through it all, silence. They weren't calling me anymore when money ran out. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one picking up their broken pieces. 2 weeks later, Daphne, the CPS worker, showed up unannounced at 10 on a Tuesday. Lucy told me later how they scrambled. Fresh EpiPens mounted neatly in the kitchen. A child lock snapped on the liquor cabinet. The emergency allergy plan taped right there on the fridge in bright red letters. Daphne didn't miss a thing. Clipboard in hand, she opened drawers, tested the lock herself, double-checked where the cleaning supplies had been moved. Lucy's hands shook as she explained each change, but this time everything was in order. The case will remain open, Daphne said, jotting notes, but you're doing better. Lucy excused herself to the bathroom and cried quietly. Damien just stared blankly at the TV. That same week I dropped the ball. I had a major campaign pitch scheduled, but my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, Mom sending frantic texts about the family. I lost track of time. When Juliet walked into the conference room, slides were half finished. I stumbled through the presentation, skipping over key data points, forgetting the budget breakdown completely. Later, Juliet called me into her office. Closed the door. Looked me dead in the eye. I hired you for results, she said coldly. Not to watch you fall apart like the last guy. Don't waste this. The weight in my stomach was instant. I realized I'd been so consumed with Damien's spiral. I was starting to create my own. Thursday morning came and Damien had another session with Amir. I only knew because Mom couldn't help but share. She said Damien walked out of the office looking wrecked, but clearer somehow. Amir had dragged the past into the light. How Dad leaving created this wound neither of us ever dealt with. How Mom tried to fix everything, filling the void, while Damien quietly drowned. How I became the stand-in father figure he never asked for, but still needed. How every time I bailed him out, it reinforced both sides of the trap, me the savior, him the failure. That session left Damien quiet for days. Not drunk, not raging. Just processing. 3 weeks later, the courthouse. The air smelled like old carpet and nerves. Vincent met us in the hallway, explaining the deal he'd managed to cut. Damien would plead to reckless driving instead of DUI. But there was still the breathalyzer installed in his car. 26 weeks of classes. For grand and fines. And probation, with a judge who didn't look like she tolerated excuses. She was older, glasses dangling from a chain. Her voice carried like it belonged to the walls. Any slip-up, Mr. Torres, and you will spend 6 months in county jail. Damien stood there in his only suit, the one from his wedding, and nodded. He accepted every word. He didn't glance at me in the gallery. Outside the courtroom, Lucy cornered me. Grabbed my arm like she'd rehearsed this moment. I'm done, she said firmly, her eyes sharp. Done being stuck between you and him. Done watching Archie lose his uncle over, whatever this is. Male pride. Ego. Control. I don't care. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. How did you even keep track of all of it, Kevin? Every dollar, every expense, down to the exact number. That spreadsheet must have taken hours. Days. 23 pages. Her tone hardened. You kept every receipt, didn't you? I didn't answer. She straightened. Archie's allergy safety class is next week. I want you there. Not as the guy with money. Not as the one keeping score. Just his uncle. Her grip loosened and she let go of my arm. Walked away without waiting for a reply. I just stood there in that courthouse hallway, her words burning in my ears. The preschool meeting happened on a Tuesday morning in a classroom that smelled like crayons, dry erase markers, and hand sanitizer. Those tiny plastic chairs creaked under us as we sat in a circle, the kind that made you feel like a giant in a toy room. I'd come prepared, laminated cards I'd designed myself, each showing step-by-step instructions for using an EpiPen, complete with pictures. I'd made copies for every classroom. The teachers passed them around, nodding and smiling. This is so helpful, one of them said, and for the first time in months, Damien actually looked at me and said thank you. No sarcasm. No bitterness. Just gratitude. It was the first normal moment we'd had since his birthday blow-up. The school nurse demonstrated the trainer pen, clicking it against a foam dummy leg, while Damien sat next to me, quiet and focused. And for a brief second I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, things could be different. 2 weeks passed before Damien texted me again. This time it wasn't a crisis, not even close. He wanted to practice for a job interview, marketing coordinator, something he'd found on Indeed. Not asking for a reference, he wrote. Just want to practice with someone who knows the field. So we met at a coffee shop downtown. He walked in with a fresh haircut, printed questions tucked into a folder, trying to look professional in khakis and a polo. He even shook my hand. But the interview itself? It was rough. He stumbled right out of the gate. Couldn't answer a basic 5-year plan question without blurting out jail or drinking. When I asked about his biggest weakness, he spiraled into a rant about letting people down. His hands shook as he tried to keep his resume flat on the table. I didn't sugarcoat it. Afterward, I gave him real feedback. Stop apologizing, I told him. Start selling what you can do. Employers want confidence, not confessions. And here's the part that caught me off guard, he listened. He typed notes into his phone, asked follow-up questions, never once got defensive. It was new. It was something. Then Friday night, everything crashed again. Mom called from the ER. Chest pains. By the time Damien and I rushed there, they had her admitted for observation. Blood pressure sky high. The nurses said stress. Years of it catching up to her body. At 2 in the morning, Damien and I ended up in the same waiting room, side by side on those stiff vinyl chairs, both of us in sweats and old t-shirts. We didn't talk about money. Didn't argue about responsibility. We just sat there, sipping machine coffee so bitter it made your teeth ache, taking turns checking on Mom. Both of us terrified we were about to lose her because of our mess. At 4 a.m. the doctor came out, exhaustion etched into his face, and told us Mom was stable. They wanted to keep her another day. Damien and I stayed until visiting hours ended. Then we walked out into the parking lot and got into our cars without saying anything real. 2 days later, Damien called me. His voice was hesitant, almost like a kid asking for permission. Amir wants me to write amends letters, he said. To you and to Lucy. But the rules are it has to be full responsibility. No asking for anything in return. He sounded nervous. Unsure. Vulnerable. For the next 2 weeks he worked on it. He texted me random questions about old dates and events, things I barely remembered. Sometimes he'd call Mom for details, then hang up frustrated when she couldn't recall exactly when things happened. He was trying. Really trying. And me? I found myself sitting at my kitchen table one night with a blank sheet of paper in front of me. I started writing my own letter. Not for him. For me. I wrote about how I used money to keep him tethered to me. How I liked being the one everyone turned to. How each check I wrote was less about helping and more about control. About making myself feel important by keeping him small. The words were ugly. They burned as I put them down. When I finished, I folded the letter up and slid it into my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to let anyone see it. Not yet. Then, out of nowhere, Lucy called me that Thursday. Her voice trembled. Do you know any good divorce lawyers? I froze. Are you filing? Not yet, she whispered. I just want to know my options. With the DUI, with the money, with everything. She'd already spoken to someone. The lawyer told her she'd likely get primary custody. But with Damien's financial state, child support would be almost nothing. She started crying. I don't want to break up our family, Kevin. I don't. But I don't know what else to do. I sat there, gripping the phone, listening to her sob, wondering if this was the moment the whole fragile structure of our family finally collapsed. The next week, Daphne from CPS sat them down for a case review. No small talk, no sugarcoating. She laid it out flat. Any relapse. Any safety incident. And Archie will be removed from the home. Damien sat there gripping his coffee mug so tight his knuckles turned white, like he could squeeze the words out of existence. Lucy sat beside him, eyes glassy, staring at the floor while Daphne ticked through the requirements. After that meeting, Lucy started going to Al-Anon. She texted me after each session, little realizations she was having. How she'd been covering for him. Making excuses. Enabling without even realizing it. Her messages read like confessions, each one carving deeper into the truth neither of them had wanted to face. Meanwhile, Damien was grinding out extra cash with food delivery. Greasy paper bags piled in the backseat of his old Honda, the smell of fried rice and wings clinging to the upholstery. One night, one of the restaurant managers mentioned they were looking for a marketing coordinator. A mid-sized place, nothing glamorous. But Damien applied. Quietly. Without telling me. For once, he used his own contacts, his own initiative. Not mine. When he finally texted me, it wasn't to ask for a reference or for coaching. It was just as simple, got the interview. Did it myself. Wish me luck. And I typed back, good luck. And I meant it. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was the company's HR rep. My stomach sank the second she said Damien's name. He'd listed me as a past employer on his resume. She asked me to verify employment dates. That's it. Just the basics. And for once, I kept it neutral. No glowing endorsement. No subtle sabotage. Just the facts. Job title. Start and end dates. Hanging up felt strange. Like I just cut the strings on a marionette I'd been pulling for years. That weekend, Lucy asked to meet for coffee. She stirred her cup nervously before blurting it out. I resented the IVF payments. The words hit me like a slap. She explained how the money had never felt like a gift. Not really. It came with invisible strings. Pressure. The unspoken weight that she could never disagree with me, never set boundaries, because how do you say no to the person who literally paid for your child to exist? The guilt landed heavy in my chest. I'm sorry, I told her. And for once it wasn't defensive. Not half-hearted. I meant it. I didn't see it. I thought I was helping, but I made it transactional. I'm sorry. She nodded, eyes rimmed red. I just needed you to hear that, before things go further with Damien. At work, things weren't much brighter. My first big campaign launch tanked. Hard. Numbers came in 40% under projections. Juliet made me stand in front of the entire board and present the failure analysis myself. I had to explain every misstep, every ignored warning sign, without pointing fingers or hiding behind excuses. The board members grilled me with question after question until my throat felt raw. It was humiliating. But the kind of humiliation that teaches you more than any easy success ever could. Afterward, Juliet pulled me aside. Failure's part of learning, she said. But hiding from failure? That's not an option here. Her words cut, but she wasn't wrong. About 3 weeks after Damien started working on his amends letters, he called me. His voice was shaky, uncertain. Can I come read mine to you? In person? That night, he showed up at my apartment. Pages trembling in his hands as he sat on the edge of my couch. And then he read. Slowly. Carefully. He took responsibility for his choices, for the drinking, for leaning on me, for resenting me at the same time. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't beg for another bailout. He just owned it. Every ugly, painful piece of it. It was uncomfortable to sit through because it was so raw. So unlike the Damien who always deflected, always joked, always dodged blame. The next day, he did the same with Lucy. Later, she told me it was the first time she'd ever heard him take full responsibility. No excuses. No twisting it. Just honesty. And that, in our family, was brand new territory. The interview at the restaurant company came the next week. Damien called me afterward, his voice steady but flat. It went okay, he admitted. Not great. They told him directly he needed more digital marketing experience, stronger Excel skills. Normally, that kind of feedback would have crushed him. He'd spiral, drown himself in whiskey, or spend hours ranting about how unfair life was. But not this time. That same night, he enrolled in free online certification courses. Sent me screenshots of his signups, Excel, Google Ads, social media analytics. No bragging. No begging. Just proof he was doing something about it. For the first time, rejection didn't send him to rock bottom. It lit a spark. The following week, Amir called me with a suggestion I didn't see coming. A joint session. Let's figure out what healthy help actually looks like, he said. So Thursday morning, I found myself in his office, sitting across from Damien in a too-small chair. Both of us looking like kids hauled into the principal's office. The air felt heavy. Stale. Amir didn't waste time. He pushed us to define boundaries, not as punishment, not as walls, but as actual rules for how we could be in each other's lives without destroying ourselves. We wrote it down like some bizarre contract. Damien could ask me for a ride to an appointment, but not gas money. I could give advice if he asked for it, but I couldn't swoop in with unsolicited fixes. And emergencies with Archie? Always exceptions. No debate. It felt surreal. Like drawing up terms of service with someone you used to share bunk beds with. Every time I slipped back into my habit of listing all the times he'd screwed up, Amir stopped me. Every time Damien fell into his poor me routine, Amir cut him off. By the end there it was, a weird little document that basically said, "We're brothers, not savior and dependent." 2 days later the ground shifted again. Lucy dropped the separation bomb. Damien thought it was just Friday dinner. But somewhere between the salad and the main course she told him she needed space. Time to figure out if she even wanted to stay married after everything that had happened. An hour later my phone buzzed. Damien's voice was wrecked. He wasn't asking me for help, just letting me know he was sitting alone in a Walmart parking lot, trying not to fall apart. The next week he found a studio apartment near Archie's school. Cramped, 3 flights up, and it smelled faintly of chemicals from the dry cleaner downstairs, but it was his. It was all he could afford. The landlord demanded first and last month plus security, which drained what little savings he'd scraped together. I helped him move in. Boxes shoved into my truck, lugging them up stairwell after stairwell in silence. No offers of money this time. Just sweat, breathless silence, and the creak of worn-out steps. Lucy stayed at their old place with Archie. 2 weeks later Daphne showed up for another inspection. She walked through the tiny apartment with her clipboard, checking smoke detectors, tugging on window locks, inspecting outlets for childproof covers. The place was barely furnished, but Damien had made one corner into Archie's space. A pile of toys. A small blanket. A sleeping bag until he could afford a real bed. Daphne snapped photos, asked about his work schedule, his support system, his plans to keep it all stable. And then she said, "If things stay steady for 1 more month, no incidents, no relapses, I'll recommend closing the case." The relief on Damien's face was so raw, I thought he might break down right there in front of her. You know what I've noticed? Writing things down changes him. When he spent weeks on those amends letters, digging up dates, calling mom about old memories, it forced him to see his life in black and white. On paper, the excuses don't sound like excuses. They sound like what they are. Patterns. Choices. Pain. It's almost like Damien needed the ink on the page to finally understand himself. About 3 weeks into the new custody arrangement, Damien's delivery company hosted this mandatory mixer at a sports bar. He texted me around 8 o'clock that night, "Everyone's drinking. They're giving me crap for ordering Coke." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. I could hear the chaos in the background, glasses clinking, bursts of laughter, the low roar of a crowd half a dozen beers deep. Damien didn't speak at first. Just breathed. Slow. Heavy. Finally, in a whisper, he said, "I'm in the parking lot. Trying not to go back in and order a beer." I didn't lecture him. I didn't tell him what to do. I didn't offer to swoop in and rescue him. I just talked. About random things, the Cubs' lousy bullpen, a weird customer complaint I'd gotten at work. Mundane stuff. We stayed on the phone for 40 minutes, until his voice steadied and I could hear the tension ease. Eventually he said he felt ready to drive home. 10 minutes later a text buzzed my phone, "Made it." But I wasn't done. Around 11 that night, I showed up at his apartment without calling first. "Come on," I said when he opened the door, looking exhausted. We ended up at this greasy 24-hour diner off the highway. Vinyl booths, buzzing fluorescent lights, coffee so bitter it made your tongue curl. We sat there until 2 in the morning sipping refills, talking about nothing important. Not about money. Not about Lucy. Not about old grudges. Just normal. He told me about a kid on his delivery route who always waited by the window to wave at him. I told him about Juliet making me redo an entire campaign because she hated the font. We laughed. Not big belly laughs, but the kind that loosen something in your chest. When the check came, Damien slid his half onto the table without me saying a word. That tiny gesture said more than a speech ever could. He drove home. I followed behind, headlights steady in his rear view, making sure he got back safe. 3 weeks later, he shocked everyone. He finished his court-ordered alcohol classes 2 months early. 2 months. The instructor even wrote a note about it, how Damien had perfect attendance, how he participated in every discussion. The judge reduced his fine by $500, and given how strapped he was, it might as well have been $5,000. Damien didn't send a speech or a dramatic declaration. Just a photo of the certificate with a single thumbs-up emoji. And me? For the first time in years I texted back, "Proud of you." And I meant it. The next week, Damien and Lucy met with a mediator to make their separation official. It happened in one of those sterile conference rooms, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air smelling faintly of copy paper. A retired judge walked them through dividing up, well, not much. Lucy kept the car. Damien kept his tools. The debt got split down the middle. But when it came to Archie, everything changed. All the arguing stopped. They locked in on one thing, stability. They agreed to live within 10 minutes of each other. To communicate only through a parenting app. To never badmouth one another to their son. The mediator leaned back, almost smiling. "That's the most mature separation I've seen all month." Meanwhile, I made a decision of my own. I listed the condo. Put it on the market that Tuesday. I told Damien he had 60 days to move out. When he asked why now, I told him the truth. Keeping it had never been pure generosity. It was about control. Leverage. I liked knowing he needed me for shelter. He surprised me. "I figured that out months ago," he said evenly. "I've already been looking. Applied for a housing voucher through a recovery program." For once, he was ahead of me. And it felt strange. The timing worked out in a way none of us could have planned. The week after I told Damien about the condo, a small logistics company called him. Coordinator position. Entry level. Paid maybe half of what he used to make, with a 6-month probation where they could fire him for any reason. Not glamorous. Not perfect. But it was a real job, with benefits, steady hours, and a chance at stability. He accepted immediately. That night he downloaded a budgeting app and showed me his plan like a kid showing off a school project. Rent? Covered. Child support? Covered. Even a line for savings, $50 a month if he was careful. It wasn't much. But it was something. 2 weeks into the job I got a ping from my bank. A new automatic transfer had been set up, $50 from Damien's account to mine, scheduled for the first of every month. In the memo line he typed, beginning. Will increase. At that rate it would take him 40 years to repay the $200,000 he owed me. But that wasn't the point. He was acknowledging it, without me forcing him to. I just sat there staring at the screen, my throat tight. For once, Damien wasn't asking for anything. He was giving. 3 weeks later, Juliet called me into her office for my 6-month review. She had a spreadsheet pulled up, columns and rows tracking every campaign I'd run. Deadlines I'd hit. Deadlines I'd missed. Even notes about meetings where I talked too much or not enough. She pointed to the early months, when I tried to prove myself by undermining coworkers and stealing credit. Then she showed me the shift after that day she'd pulled me aside. How I'd started listening. Sharing credit. Building instead of competing. The numbers didn't lie. Team output was up 20%. Juliet slid a folder across the desk. Promotion paperwork. The probation period was officially over. Salary. Stock options. VP for real this time. I thanked her for not giving up on me when I'd been acting like an ass. She gave me this small smile that said, don't screw it up again. That same afternoon, Daphne called about closing the CPS case. She came by Damien's apartment one last time with her clipboard. Checked the locked medicine cabinet. The allergy action plan taped neatly by the fridge. The fresh EpiPens labeled and ready. Lucy and Damien sat on opposite ends of the couch, barely looking at each other, while Daphne talked about the progress they'd made. How Archie was thriving despite everything. Then she handed them the official closure letter. Case closed with the standard warning about maintaining safety protocols. After she left, they didn't celebrate with words. They just took Archie to the park. Lucy and Damien stood on either side of the swings, each giving him a push, catching him at the bottom of the slide. Silent but present. The following week, Mom ambushed us with an appointment she'd already booked, family therapy downtown. So there we were, the three of us in a beige office that smelled faintly of peppermint tea. The therapist asked about our childhood, about how Dad leaving had shaped us. Mom admitted she'd always seen it as her job to smooth things over. Keep the peace at any cost. I admitted the truth I'd kept buried, that I'd gotten addicted to being needed. That solving everyone's problems wasn't just generosity, it made me feel important. Damien admitted his part too. How standing next to me all his life made him feel like a failure. How resentment had been gnawing at him for years. The therapist didn't let us stop there. She made us practice new patterns right there in the office. Mom had to sit on her hands, literally, while we disagreed about something. I had to let Damien finish speaking without jumping in with solutions. Damien had to practice asking for specific help instead of expecting me to swoop in with rescue. By the end, we were exhausted. Raw. But lighter. We scheduled another session for the following week. That night, I sat at my desk and typed out a simple list. The subject line read, what I can offer. It wasn't long. It wasn't flowery. Just clear. I'd drive Archie to medical appointments if I had 48 hours notice. I'd do practice interviews if he scheduled them in advance. I'd answer true emergency calls about Archie's health. And that was it. No money. No co-signing. No last-minute babysitting. No swooping in to fix his life. I hit send before I could overthink it. An hour later, Damien replied with 2 words, fair enough. And for once, he meant it. That entire month, he only texted me twice, and both times stayed exactly within the boundaries we'd set. A month later, he landed a big account at work, and his coworkers invited him to happy hour. Instead of caving, he texted me a photo. He was standing outside the bar, neon lights glowing over his shoulder. The caption read, heading to AA instead. I knew what that meant. Later that night, just before 11, another text came through, 90 days sober today. Thanks for answering that night. I saved that message. Sent him a single thumbs up, knowing he'd understand. The next week, Lucy called while I was pushing a grocery cart down the aisle. Her voice was steady, different somehow. She told me she and Damien were still living apart, but they'd started couples counseling. Learning how to talk without screaming. Money was tight, 2 rents will do that, but they were making it work. She'd picked up extra shifts, Damien still did delivery runs on weekends. But what struck me most was her tone. She didn't sound like someone drowning in his chaos anymore. She sounded in control. Like she was driving her own life for the first time in years. 6 weeks later, we gathered at the park for Archie's 5th birthday, the same park where we'd celebrated the CPS closure. Damien showed up with an EpiPen trainer and made it part of the party games. One by one, the adults practiced while Archie giggled and coached them through the steps. Blue to the sky, orange to the thigh. He chanted, his little voice ringing across the playground. Mom nailed it on her first try. Lucy needed 2 attempts. I deliberately botched mine so Archie could correct me, and he laughed so hard he almost fell over. Even some of the other parents joined in, turning what had once been terrifying into something normal, even fun. Damien stayed sober the entire time. When we toasted Archie, he raised a plastic champagne flute filled with apple juice, smiling like it was the finest wine in the world. 8 months had passed since that awful night, since Archie's face swelled and I stood silent on the phone, waiting for Damien to admit he needed me. 8 months. And when I finally sat down to take stock, I realized how far we'd come. Damien had made 6 monthly payments. $50 each. Never missed one. He'd stayed sober. Attended meetings twice a week. Kept his job even when they cut hours. Lucy and Damien were still separated, but they were working on themselves, co-parenting better apart than they ever had together. Mom's blood pressure was under control. No more frantic calls in the middle of the night. Archie? Thriving. His kindergarten teacher said he was confident, curious, happy. And Damien and I? We weren't close the way we used to be. We talked maybe once a week, mostly about schedules and logistics. But it was honest. Real. No more power games. No more rescue missions. No more fake closeness built on money and resentment. And for the first time in a long time, when Damien told me he was doing okay, I actually believed him. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.